Hello, I'm Maya Bethany with Foundation Innovation for the Texas Education Foundation Network. The March primary is fast approaching and Texas public education continues to be a hot button issue. In the Republican race, Scott Milder is challenging the incumbent, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. We recently sat down with Scott Milder to discuss the state of Texas public schools. What is your platform? What is the biggest component that you want to see put into place if you win the election?
Well, I'd like to see the Lieutenant Governor address the real pressing issues facing our state. We have many critical issues that we've got to address. We have infrastructure crisis problems. Our highways are gridlocked. We have incredible growth going on, and that's just so our highways and bridges and such are just going to get more and more use and more congested. Our education system, they're doing great work with the little resources that they have, but our Lieutenant Governor refuses to address school funding. And if we don't address school funding, then we can't address property tax relief.
Why the decision to run for office?
Oh gosh, Maya, there's so many reasons why I've decided to run. But it really all boils down to is people want a Lieutenant Governor who will govern with respect and civility, and I think particularly educators are just tired of his antics and his anti-public education agenda.
What do you know about education foundations in the state of Texas?
Well, I know that they provide an essential service to help fill in many of the gaps that the state has created by not funding our public schools, and so they're an essential part of the strategic mix for public school operations, and always will be. They help teachers with grants. They help with scholarships, and they help cover some of the expenses that our school districts just cannot fund any longer.
Your background in starting Texas or Friends of Texas Public Schools, what led you to create that organization and get involved?
Right, yeah, so my wife and I met in the high school teachers lounge at the school where she was teaching, and over the course of the couple of years that we were dating and then we first got married, she expressed frustration with how teachers and educators were constantly being picked on in the media and in politics and just in the public debate. And my background's in public relations, so we had a blending of public relations and teaching, and we had conversations around those professions, and I finally told her after she'd been venting for so long, I said, look, what you have is an image problem, and what you need is a really good PR campaign, because people don't know all the great stuff that's happening in your schools.
You've got the ambassador program that was part of it. What were some of the other things that were done through Friends of Texas Public Schools?
Well, the first thing we did was a lot of research. We really wanted to find out, okay, so what are the great things happening in our public schools across the state as a whole, as a big team of people? What are we accomplishing? And we found out that we had the highest graduation rates in America. We consistently outperform other states in every subgroup, whether it's the white population, African American, Hispanic, Asian, economically disadvantaged. We consistently outperform every other state in the nation on many of the national benchmarks. And so once we had that data, we started putting together posters and programs and presentations, and then created the ambassador program to help educators understand, because they didn't even know all this. They didn't know that they were doing so well.
What would be one of the first things you'd like to see changed about public education in Texas?
Boy, I tell you what, there's so many things to work on with our public schools in Texas, but the great thing is we have a great foundation of success to build upon, and what I'd really like to see is I'd like the state to treat our public schools with the honor and respect that they deserve, and to start funding them again like they used to.
The political landscape in this whole nation right now seems to be in disarray. What would you like to see change under that?
That's true. The political landscape is upside down, and it's very mean-spirited and disrespectful and underhanded. Everybody's trying to discredit the next guy or lady. And what I would like to really see, and I said it earlier, is I would like to see respect and civility restored to our political machine in Texas and across the nation. It's okay to disagree with each other, but there's no reason to do it disrespectfully. We can disagree, and then we ought to be able to go and grab a sandwich together after, have some lunch, and continue the discussion, because we're all Americans, we're all Texans, and in fact Texas is the friendship state. It's one of our state slogans, state motto, and Texans want people serving who are good neighbors, who are neighborly, who are respectful, who are kind, and treat each other with respect.
Any plans that you would have your first few days in office, what would that look like?
You know, I'm asked that quite a bit, actually. What my first few days in office? My first few days in office are going to be pretty much the start of a legislative session. so it'll be way before the first few days in office where I'm getting started. But I'll be putting a lot of people who are smarter than me around the table to help come up with solid, thoughtful, reasonable, measured solutions to the many challenges that we face.
How many of those folks will be educators?
Oh, you know what? That's one of the things that our state has failed to do over the years, is when they're debating and discussing how to improve education or how to fix public schools, they don't ever include an educator. You don't see a school superintendent at the table. You don't see a classroom teacher at the table. You don't see an education foundation director at the table. You see politicians and business leaders, and that's fine, but you also have to have educators. You have to have the experts in the room who know a thing or two about what's going on in the classrooms.
We reached out to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's office and received this response. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is not available to meet for an interview before the March primary. However, if you are available to meet later in the spring, we would be happy to try and coordinate a time. We plan to try and set up a future interview with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, so if you would like to submit your questions, you can do so at info@foundationinnovation.com.